everyone, this is Speaker Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about the great Michael Douglas, one of the truly awesome, versatile and commanding actors, especially from the 1980s, and we will do a breakdown and ranking of his best movies overall throughout his great career. Now I will try and avoid spoilers for the movies mentioned, but you can check out the films listed within the description just in case you haven't seen them yet. So the first entry that we'll talk about within this list is Basic Instinct from 1992. The highly notorious and sexually charged thriller sees Douglas detective being completely spellbound by Sharon Stone's author Catherine Trammell whilst on the trail of a serial killer. Now overall this is a very typical Hollywood thriller with enough thrills and entertainment, with director Paul Verhoeven pushing things to the absolute limit in the only way that he can. Now yes, of course it was Sharon Stone who was the revelation from this film for obvious reasons, but Douglas is still solid in the lead role for what was yet another movie where he played this everyman character falling prey to a dominant sexual femme fatale, a role that he would very much become a specialist in throughout his career. But Basic Instinct still remains a very mainstream watchable thriller and executes exactly what it sets out to do. We then go back to the beginning of Douglas's great run throughout the 80s, and we start off with a movie called Romancing the Stone. Very much a romantic adventure with Douglas playing a somewhat Indiana Jones variant, a bird smuggler named Jack Colton, who helps out Kathleen Turner's novelist to rescue her sister who has been kidnapped within Colombia. And this is just an all-round crowd-pleasing movie, and it was the first of Douglas's 3 movies with Kathleen Turner, and their on-screen chemistry is all here to see, and that spark and relationship is definitely the driving force behind this movie, as well as a more smaller role included with Danny DeVito. And overall this is that mixture of romance and comedy and adventure, very much old school style of storytelling that we don't really see the looks of today, but it's still a welcome entry and overall a very good watch still today. And coming off Romancing the Stone, we might as well mention Jewel of the Nile from 1985, the sequel to that film reuniting Douglas and Turner once more with the same characters, this time setting them in an African desert alongside Danny DeVito once more. And this sequel is a bit more hectic and faster paced than the first film, but again still very enjoyable thanks to the presence and charisma of all 3 lead actors. And yes, as somebody who grew up in the 1980s, I will always have a fondness with memories for this film, especially due to the great Billy Ocean song When the Going Gets Tough, the Tough Gets Going, especially when you refer to the music video where we have all of the 3 actors and dancing on stage in the white suits. Very classic stuff, and Jewel of the Nile is definitely as rewatchable as Romancing the Stone. And from that film we might as well reference the third and probably best of the trio's collaborations together, and that is The War of the Roses. With Danny DeVito directing as well as starring as a divorce lawyer, he tells the tale of newlyweds Douglas and Turner and their journey of their increasing toxic marriage that literally escalates into an attritional battle and war. Now when this movie first released, I wildly remember it originally thinking this was indeed the third movie from Romancing the Stone and Jewel of the Nile, but that isn't the case, as this is a much more darker, macabre and savage commentary. Maybe it's a bit hyperbole, and especially towards when we get to the third act, but once more Douglas and Turner are great together in what's another fine directing job from Danny DeVito, continuing that Hitchcock style in terms of suspense and comedy that he started from the equally entertaining Throw Mama from the Train in 1987. And staying within that year and on the topic of toxic adult relationships, we then go to Fatal Attraction. This time set within a more realistic contemporary setting, where we see Douglas's lawyer having a casual affair with Glenn Close's editor, going back to his wife thinking he's in the clear. His worst fears are realised as Glenn Close stalks him relentlessly, going on to terrorise both him and his family. Now this film hit that 80s zeitgeist of being the first real mainstream movie to look at adultery, where the male is more the victim and the woman is the much more sexualised aggressor. As well as adultery, this movie taps into themes of exploitation, self-harm and mental illness, and this was yet another one of Douglas's more vulnerable everyman roles, so rooted in the 80s culture, and like Basic Instinct, he is in many ways seconded to the intense performance of Glenn Close, and her interpretation of a woman scorned became a staple characterization throughout the late 1980s, very controversial and also a variant of that femme fatale. The movie itself would go on to become the highest grossing movie of 1987, sparking several debates amongst both critics and general fans in general, and it also elevated Douglas's star power even further as a leading actor. So we'll then go on to possibly one of Douglas's most underrated entries, and that is The Ghost and the Darkness. Set in the late 18th century, as famed hunter Charles Remington, he teams up with engineer Val Kilmer to hunt down vicious lions within Kenya and within a train construction site. This is a real gripping and intense historical adventure with elements of vague horror and the supernatural. And it's really well crafted and a compelling story from director of Predator 2 Stephen Hopkins, who really ramps up all of the atmosphere and tension, especially when we look at the recreation of the lines themselves, which really feel threatening all the way through. And yes, Douglas doesn't enter the movie until about the halfway stage, but he still carries a screen presence and bounces off well with Val Kilmer, who is in the lead role more. And I do think it's a real shame that this movie is largely forgotten about, as it really is well directed and a real impressive piece of work, for sure. We'll then move on to another vastly underrated film, and that is the cop thriller Black Rain. Based within New York City, we see cops Michael Douglas and Andy Garcia tracking down a fearsome Japanese gangster, first in the US and then later on in Osaka in Japan. And as well as clashing with the Japanese police force, they also come into combat with the Yakuza crime organisation. Ridley Scott's stylish, gritty action is full of class and excitement and violent intensity, and Douglas is absolutely great here in the lead role as the burdened cop Nick Conlon, with his own personal dilemmas and typically abrasive attitude. He also has very good rapport with Andy Garcia and also a very good looking Kate Capshaw in this film as well. And this movie did do very well at the box office in terms of its release, but it rarely gets mentioned in discussions over Douglas's or Ridley Scott's career. But it's overall a fantastic film with another good musical score from the great Hans Zimmer, so a very fine entry here that deserves far more attention in the thriller Black Rain. So we then come up to the runner-up on this list, a movie that many online fans today would deem as his overall best movie, and that is Falling Down. This is where we see Douglas as William Foster, or named as Defence throughout the film, who was a former government defence worker who was laid off from his job, separated from his wife and child, and we see him in the beginning stuck in a traffic jam in the searing heat in Los Angeles, and he absolutely reaches breaking point. Leaving his car, he's overall provoked and antagonised by the society around him. This is an absorbing drama that actually has some more comedic and funny elements, but ultimately it's a commentary on potential psychological and mental breakdown, social and economic status, and emotional stress, and also personal longing. It's a movie that's gained more resonance and relevance over the years because of its themes of loneliness, abandonment, rejection, all of these elements that audiences current today really seem to relate more to and are compelled to watch, which is his own debate and discussion. And many movie fans have established Defence as much more as an anti-villain or an unhinged personality, similar to what we saw in the likes of Taxi Driver or the Joker film from 2019. But it really isn't that when you look at this overall character. This is a person who feels wrongly ignored or mistreated, but ultimately just wants to find his place within society and be with his family. And it's an absolutely towering performance from Douglas, again tapping into that white collar, everyman cynical personality, but managing also to draw a sense of pathos and empathy. It's a well balanced job also from Joel Schumacher, which is likely his best movie of his career, and without question one of the best performances of Michael Douglas' filmography. And whilst many have deemed Falling Down to be his best movie, we will move on to that distinction, the number one film on this list, and that is of course Wall Street. At the epicenter and heart of the finance industry, we see Charlie Sheen's Bud Fox, who is a young stockbroker hungry for success, completely taken in and seduced by corporate titan Gordon Gekko, with the promise of dreams of being a true player within the top of the hierarchy. But steadily he finds out that the fast track to success comes at a very heavy price. Despite the subject matter, director Oliver Stone wisely keeps the detail very broad and accessible, avoiding the more complex financial jargon, and focusing much more on the well-familiar story of the young character being corrupted by the temptations of evil, doing whatever it takes. And we ask the obvious questions as to whether doing whatever it takes to succeed is really worth it. How much are you willing to sell your soul or compromise your morals in order for money? And the movie plays through that narrative well, with a back then potential star in Charlie Sheen, who was just coming off Platoon, also directed by Oliver Stone, also starring alongside his father Martin Sheen, and of course we had the supermodel-esque Daryl Hannah. But of course the heart and force of this movie is Douglas himself, As Gordon Gekko, he is simply one of the most memorable villains in all of movies. So symbolic of the 80s, the ruthless, sharp, unrelenting business CEO, full of cynicism and absolutely no sentimentality, with all the sharp suits, the flash cars and the private jets. In many ways, he was an inspiration for so many young men aspiring for that equally wealthy lifestyle, which in many ways signals the true impact of the character. And Douglas just elevates the movie in every scene he's in. This is a role that he just seems was born to play. Cemented by the greed is good speech, this is without question his most iconic role and ultimately his best screen performance, of which he was rewarded by winning the Oscar for Best Actor in 1987. And very much like the character himself, the movie is very slick and polished and always rewatchable, typifying every bit that 80s mainstream film, and for all of those elements, it does without question rank as Michael Douglas's best and most memorable movie. So that's my overall thoughts and feelings when looking back at the successful career of Michael Douglas. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other further suggestions, movies, television series, or any other issues within the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover, then also let me know within the comments and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please consider hitting like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves and I will see you very, very soon.